because you have an Iranian presence in Kuwait, you had an Iranian presence in Saudi Arabia, of course in Yemen, in Iraq, but nowhere was this clearer than in the case of Bahrain. The Iranian attempts at destabilizing Bahrain go right back to the beginning of the revolution. So in 1981, the Iranians actually attempted a coup d'etat against Bahrain, and they tried to bring it into the fold of the Islamic Republic. That's why from 1981, the rhetoric in Iran shifts, and they begin referring to Bahrain as the 14th province. In other words, the 14th province of Persia, and the Iranians are going to claim Bahrain as their own. Now, over the decades, Bahrain has faced essentially one intifada after another, inspired by Iran, or even in some cases led by Iran. In the aftermath of 2011, for instance, the Iranian Hezbollah has been very active in Bahrain. The Saraya al-Ashtar has been very active in Bahrain. And, essentially Bahrain has had its hands full trying to deal with the attempted insurgencies on behalf of Iran. But here's the most important part. That is the way that Bahrain has actually fought against this type of radicalization that kind of swims in across the sea, and doesn't do so by putting people in prison, unless of course they are involved in terrorism or terror plots and this kind of political violence. But it doesn't oppress. What it does is it engages, and that's why we're marking this week the 18th anniversary of the National Action Charter, in other words, a constitution, and the transformation of Bahrain into a constitutional monarchy. And from that time until now, what we've seen is 5 elections, parliamentary elections, and an increasing number of women involvement in politics, socialists getting more involved in politics. You're having a real secularization process taking place in the legal and political framework of the country. Now, of course, you can't really compare Bahrain to Iran. Bahrain has about 1,200,000 residents in the country, where Iran is well over 80 million people. So, of course, the political systems are going to be very different from each other. But what is interesting is the way that Bahrain is embracing its multiculturalism and trying to ensure that there is no sectarianism agenda within the country. Whereas on the other hand, what the Iranians are trying to do is reinforce a sectarian agenda in a country that has so many different peoples, ethnicities, religions being represented. But what they're trying to do is force one particular, i.e. their form of Shiism, with an Ayatollah, the imamate, if you will, rather than engaging and embracing its multiculturalism. So it's very interesting. But because of this, Iran is doubly afraid of Bahrain. It's afraid of Bahrain not because Bahrain can invade it the way that it seeks to invade Bahrain, but they're afraid of Bahrain because of what Bahrain represents, because it does have a constitutional monarchy, because it is able to address the concerns of its people. And what you've seen is that in over the past 8 years, since the troubles really reached their peak, is that a wide assortment of civil society groups are being formed, and they're trying to allay the sectarian kind of agenda, or they're trying to overcome the sectarian agenda that's being imported, or rather exported from Iran into the western coast and western side of the Arab Gulf, including in Bahrain. So I think it's very important that we keep in mind these contrasting visions for the nation as we go forward and understand the future, let's say, of Gulf politics. And we really hope that all the countries in the Middle East and in the Gulf in particular continue to progress. And I really would like maybe to underline the fact that Iran deserves better leadership than it's had in the past 40 years. And what we see in Iran is that the demonstrations and the pushback by their own population is an indication that they know that they deserve something better. When it comes to Bahrain, The Bahraini people voted for the National Action Charter. They have a system that is reflective of their interests and of their national aspirations. And so I think that it's not an overstatement to suggest that Iran could really learn from a country like Bahrain. Thank you very much. I look forward to your feedback.